In the tumultuous landscape of American politics, where each new administration seeks to imprint its vision onto the vast machinery of government, the Trump administration's second term has been met with immediate legal resistance. This resistance has crystallized around actions concerning the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, where judicial interventions have temporarily halted some of the administration's more radical policy shifts and bureaucratic purges. Donald Trump's re-entry into the White House, his agenda clear: to dismantle what he perceives as the excesses of government, particularly those agencies he believes are not aligned with his America First policy. Among the early targets were the CFPB, an agency designed to protect consumers from financial exploitation, and USAID, the primary vehicle for U.S. humanitarian and development assistance abroad. The CFPB, established under the Dodd-Frank Act in response to the 2008 financial crisis, has long been a point of contention for Republicans who argue it wields too much unchecked power. Trump's first term saw attempts to rein in its authority through executive action and by appointing a more conservative director, Mick Mulvaney, who was seen by critics as diluting the agency's consumer protection efforts. The second term escalated these efforts with an immediate order to freeze its activities, a move spearheaded by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who was named acting director after the abrupt dismissal of Rohit Chopra, appointed by the previous administration. The legal challenge came swiftly. A federal judge, Carl Nichols, appointed by Trump himself during his first term, issued a temporary restraining order against Bessent's directives. This judicial intervention was based on the premise that the administration's actions could not only disrupt ongoing consumer protections but also potentially violate the law by attempting to unilaterally dismantle or significantly alter an agency's function without congressional approval. The judge's decision highlighted a critical tension between executive authority and the checks and balances intended by the separation of powers. The rationale behind the judge's decision included concerns over the cessation of all CFPB activities, which contradicted its statutory mandate to protect consumers. The CFPB, under Chopra, had been active in enforcing regulations against predatory lending practices, reducing overdraft fees, and ensuring transparency in financial services. The halt order specifically addressed the immediate cessation of rulemaking, enforcement actions, and public communications, which could leave consumers vulnerable to financial malpractices during the transition period. Simultaneously, the Trump administration's approach to USAID was equally aggressive. Trump's campaign rhetoric had often targeted foreign aid as wasteful, and his second term began with an executive order to freeze U.S. foreign assistance. This was followed by directives to cease USAID's operations, which included the removal of agency signage and the suspension of its digital presence. The aim was clear: to integrate USAID under the State Department, reducing its independence and potentially its humanitarian focus, aligning it more closely with Trump's foreign policy objectives. Legal challenges to this move came from multiple fronts. A group of Democratic senators, concerned about the legality of such a drastic restructuring without congressional consent, voiced strong opposition. The judicial pushback was also swift, with Judge Nichols issuing another temporary order, preventing the administration from placing nearly 200 USAID employees on administrative leave or proceeding with plans to withdraw the agency's overseas workforce. This intervention underscored the judiciary's role as a bulwark against unilateral executive action, particularly when it involves the dissolution or significant alteration of established federal agencies. The legal arguments here revolved around the constitutional separation of powers, where Congress is explicitly given the authority to establish and fund federal agencies. The administration's actions were seen as bypassing this process, attempting to reshape government structure by executive fiat alone. Critics argued this was not only an overreach, but potentially illegal, as it sought to ignore the legislative branch's role in government organization. Moreover, the involvement of Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, added another layer of controversy. Musk, a special government employee, was seen by many as overly influential in these administrative purges, with his team accessing sensitive government data and systems, raising significant privacy and ethical concerns. His role in both the CFPB and USAID scenarios, where his team was reportedly involved in the physical and digital dismantling of these agencies, highlighted the intersection of private sector influence in public policy implementation. These judicial interventions have broader implications for the Trump administration's approach to governance. They signal that the judiciary remains a significant check on executive power, particularly when actions can be perceived as circumventing legal processes or democratic norms. For the CFPB, this means consumer protections will continue, at least temporarily, under the shadow of ongoing litigation. For USAID, it means a pause in the administration's attempt to realign or dissolve the agency, allowing time for legal and perhaps political battles to unfold. The legal challenges also reflect a broader narrative of resistance to what some see as an overreach of executive power. They underscore the ongoing debate about the role of government, the balance of power among the branches, and how much influence one administration should have in reshaping the bureaucratic landscape. These cases are likely to set precedents for how future administrations approach similar reforms, whether through legislative means or executive action. In both instances, the judiciary has acted to preserve the status quo while legal debates are settled, emphasizing the importance of due process and legislative oversight in the American system of governance. The outcomes of these legal battles could define the limits of executive power in agency reform and potentially influence how future policy changes are implemented across the government. As these legal battles continue, they serve as a reminder of the dynamic and often contentious relationship between the branches of government, where each move by the executive can be met with a corresponding counter from the judiciary, safeguarding the principles of democracy that have long defined U.S. political life.